Hey everyone, time for another classy settings video. So this is the X90J. Yes, I've had this before, did some videos, but that was before having tools to take measurements, and didn't really give it too much time either. That was when I was just starting out and was more focused on the 4K 120Hz blur issue with Sony, but anyway, that's all in the past. And I'll probably private those videos just because this will be more accurate, more up to date. At the start, you have those little checkboxes of marketing and privacy and blah blah blah. You can go through all this without agreeing to it. I'm pretty sure that if you want to sign into your account and download apps, that you are going to have to agree to the stuff, and I just wanted to get through it quickly, so I just said whatever and agreed, because I have to download the Kalman for Bravia app in order to sync the TV up to the Kalman software to take the measurements and allow it to do AutoCal and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, long story short, I wanted to take measurements of all the default picture modes and basic setting adjustments that anyone can do, and then recommend to you the best settings from there without having to get a calibration. And also, Sony locks the 20-point white balance controls and the pro picture modes unless you download that app, and most people aren't going to do that, so I'm just going to use what's available to everybody and go from there. So to start off, we'll start with the Xbox Series X, the HDR setup, and the HDMI port settings. Because of where the TV is currently positioned, the only place I can put the camera and have it in frame is literally right here, so that's why it's not straight on, it's a little bit off angle. Alright, so this is the home screen where you have your app list, and you can also get to your inputs and settings and so on from here. You can also set the television to just go to the last input that was used before you turn the TV off. And at this point I'm not signed in yet, otherwise there would be more apps, the App Store, recommendations, and all of that on here. So, interestingly enough, the HDMI port read that it is an Xbox, but it will not use ALLM-like features like it does with the PlayStation. It won't put it into game mode even though it knows it's an Xbox, but it will do that with a PlayStation if you have the auto picture mode setting turned on. So, checking to make sure that the TV is up to date is really important, especially here early in its life, because the original firmware that it launched with had issues with input lag and frame skipping or stutter when playing games. So just make sure your software is up to date, and then if you press the help button on the remote, it will tell you in the bottom left of the screen what firmware version you are on. So that PKG6.3629.0454, that's, as of the time of this video, the most recent update. Next, I like to go into the power settings and make sure that there's no power saving turned on, and I personally turn off the auto turn off, but that's up to you. Then you need to go to channels and inputs, and then external inputs, and then HDMI signal format. And what you want to do is change your 3 and 4 to either enhanced or enhanced Dolby Vision. These are the HDMI 2.1 ports. So what I recommend doing is putting your main console device into port 4 and then using port 3 because it's the eARC port for your receiver or soundbar, etc. So I have a receiver with my NVIDIA Shield, 4K Blu-ray player, and so on plugged in. So I set that one to Dolby Vision, and then I run the Xbox Series X into HDMI 4 set to enhanced so that it can do the 4K 120 Hz. You cannot do Dolby Vision and 4K 120 Hz at the same time, or even have it set the same time. You have to switch between one and the other. So when the Xbox does get Dolby Vision gaming here soon, you're going to have to switch back and forth as you want to switch between a Dolby Vision game or running a game at 120 Hz. Or even if you just wanted to watch Netflix or HBO or whatever in Dolby Vision, you would have to switch that every time. So that's why I suggest having a Dolby Vision device going to 3, and then your console that you want to play at 120 Hz going to HDMI 4. Now, after making that change, if your device is already plugged in and turned on, you can get a green screen like this. Don't worry, nothing's broken. It's just a handshake issue. All you got to do is just trigger the television to reset for a second. So just by changing the refresh rate, you can see it just reset the signal, and then you change it right back, and it's back to normal. All right, and then if you go to the 4K TV details, you can see what I was just explaining about Dolby Vision. That's not going to be checked unless you put it in the Dolby Vision enhanced mode, but then you give up the 120 Hz. Now the Xbox has the check mark for auto low latency, but again, the TV does not support that yet. It is supposed to come in the winter. We'll see what happens. Allow YCC 422, you pretty much want to just leave that unchecked. And then now for the HDR setup, what you want to do is on the first step of it, you want to go all the way left so that it's just pure black, and that way it knows what a pure black setting is. And then you open your picture settings and you go to HDR tone mapping, and you need to turn that off when setting up the system, and also each individual game. If there's an HDR slider for brightness adjustment, then you need to disable the HDR tone mapping again, make your adjustment, and then turn it back to gradation preferred. Now, I just went through all the settings here before doing anything, taking any measurements. They're left them pretty much all the same just to get through this part, make sure there wasn't anything that needed to be disabled or out of the ordinary. So when you press the center select circle button on the remote on a setting like that, it'll put it down there in the bottom corner so that it doesn't fill up so much of the screen, and you can make adjustments. So at that first screen, we went all the way left, make it black. This screen, go all the way left, which is equivalent to 300 nits, and you're going to see this checkerboard pattern. And now each click to the right is 50 nits. And on the first one, you want to end up at 900, and on the second one, you want to end up at 700. So right now, if you count the clicks, it's a little bit different because this is before adjusting settings, but when I came back and did it later, I redid it, and I got 900 nits on this first screen and 700 nits on the second full screen one. The second one is lower because it's full screen. And now we turn tone mapping back to gradation, and you can see the image of the sun goes from blown out to being able to see the details of it. Alright, I'm going to go over the out-of-the-box calibration report here. First, on the grayscale multi-point, everything tracked very well all the way through, except for this bottom area between 5 and 10. It overshoots a little bit. Let me show you right there. So just that spot right there was a little bit off. You can see right here, just a little too high. I mean, everything's a little bit over, but it was these two that were just, especially the 5, it was nearly double what it should be. But the rest of this line was very nice. You can see the whole line here. There's that little bump and overshoot, but everything else tracks very nicely. The grayscale 2-point looked like this, so very, very nice out of the box. This is using the custom preset mode with Expert 1 color. All the dynamic stuff turned off, obviously, and the out of the box brightness, where is it? Was 390, yeah, 390 at the 35 brightness setting. But if you turn the brightness up all the way and then you turn peak luminance on high, you have local dimming on high, This is not HDR. This is SDR. 785 nits in SDR. That is just crazy bright. Like, I was not expecting that much. And that's our 10% window. And then at the, everything maxed out, max brightness, peak luminance high, full field was 545, I believe. Still very high. Alright, and our pre-cal. Again, you can see that little bump right there. But the airs are absolutely excellent in the grayscale out of the box, and the color really isn't that bad either. The only color that really popped up there was the orange. So overall, this is quite nice out of the box. And to fix this little bump, that's pretty easy. So I'm going to go switch over to the TV and show how to do that. In order to get the 20-point adjustment unlocked, you have to get the Kalman for Bravia app installed onto the TV. But once you do that, you go into the 20-point, you go to the first one, and just turn red, green, and blue down by 15 points. And then go to the second one, and turn them down by 5 points. So you can see that blends in real nicely. And then down here are targets. Again, it's okay if they're a little bit over, because through the whole range it's just a little bit over, so it stays nice and smooth. And I don't want to suggest a bigger change that would apply to less people, because there is panel variance. But by taking a moderate change of -15 and -5 in those first two ranges, it should put you well within the target distance for 5 and 10. Alright, now for the overwhelming majority of you, you're not going to want to download the Kalman app and unlock that 20-point. So you're going to be stuck with just using the 10-point, which means you can only adjust the first step, which is going to be 10, although it will affect 5 a little bit. So that's what I based the rest of this on. And going through the rest of the settings here, what I was doing is using the custom mode for daytime SDR TV and movie viewing. I found that the contrast of the default of 90 would clip color, so I had to drop that to 83. The gamma setting at 0 tracks for 2.2 gamma, and -2 tracks for 2.4. And now for this mode, I wanted to aim for 400 nits, so if you put it at 45 brightness and you have peak luminance turned off, then that will put you at 400 nits. You want to have the auto local dimming set to high because of blooming concerns. Now, medium may show a little more detail, but I mean very, very slightly. However, I just find the blooming to be too distracting, so I fully recommend using high because of that. Now, and then as we come down here, motion settings are up to you. The clearness setting is the black frame insertion, which does dim the image a little bit. So if you want to keep 400 nits while having that black frame insertion to level 1, then set it to max, and I still measure 400 nits. Now, I cannot stand soap opera effect, but I do find having the smoothness at min and the clearness or the black frame insertion at 1 is pretty nice. I don't notice any soap opera effect, at least not yet, not in anything I've seen, so that's what I've been using. I recommend giving it a try, just so maybe it smooths out a little bit of judder here and there, but without giving that soap opera effect. If you don't like it, no problem, flip it all off, and then if you want the 400 nits, just set your brightness back to 45. So that's how I was setting up the custom mode for, again, bright room, SDR, TV, movies, and go back through here one more time. Did I miss anything? Black level, keep at 50, don't touch that. The black adjust and advanced contrast enhancer you want off. Color you want on Expert 1. Expert 1 and Expert 2 are the same thing, it's just two different custom profiles. Reality creation you can set to auto or manual, that's up to you. I find manual 20 to be pretty good, it's not really invasive. Smooth gradation, again, that's up to you, but I wouldn't recommend going higher than low, because then you can lose fine detail. Cinemotion, you set to low for like TV and some lower quality content, you set to high for, Netflix and higher streaming quality content. If you notice any frame skipping in what you're watching, it might be because the Cinemotion is on the wrong setting. And there you want all three of those settings on auto, and then we come down into the 10-point control, and you can see all I did is on step 1, bring red, green, and blue evenly down to -15, and that will mostly smooth out the overshoot in the near black area. So if you find really dark areas seem like the shadow detail is overblown or too gray, that's why, because it's boosting that low range just a little too much. So by making that simple change, it should smooth everything out, and you should have the shadow detail without it being overblown. Alright, now here for game mode, pretty much going to do about the same thing. I was targeting 400 nits, set the contrast to 83, and you want to have most everything turned off. Keep auto local dimming to high. If you want really bright and you're fighting windows and lights, turn your peak luminance up. Again, you can get up to like 785 nits, so it gets very bright. But having it off with the backlight maxed at 50, that's 400 nits. Don't adjust the sharpness any, keep it at 50, that's neutral. Smooth gradation, again, that's up to you. If you see banding, you can turn it up, but you will lose fine detail. You may even want to just turn it off. And then for gaming, you really want motion flow turned off. And the adjustment that we made to the 10-point, that first step, the +15 to red, green, and blue, that saves to the Expert 1 color mode. So any picture preset that you have set to Expert 1 will have that same setting. That's what the Expert 2 comes in if you wanted to have another setting be different. But for all the picture modes, you want to have that like it is, except for Dolby Vision, which we will touch on later. Now for dark movie watching, I'm adjusting the cinema mode. So the mode should all be the same once you make the same adjustments or settings to each. Now originally setting the brightness to 8 was 150 nits with the gamma at -2, and that's 2.4 gamma. But if you use the black frame insertion or the clearness setting, then you need to turn that up a little bit. Make sure you turn off live color. That is not accurate. That is a color boosting or saturation boosting setting. So right here with the motion flow on clearness 1, again, that made the brightness at 8 drop down. I think it was 100 nits at that setting. Yes, so if you want 100 nits for SDR and you want the black frame insertion or the clearness at 1, set the backlight brightness to 8. But if you want 150 nits, which is personally what I like, then you want to set it to 15. So right here I was just double checking those measurements and redoing the luminance test. And if you plan to use a higher setting on the clearness or black frame insertion, then you will probably need to pull the brightness up even more. I do know if you go higher than 2 on the BFI though, then you can see some flicker in the screen, so I wouldn't do that. Alright, so to recap, the dark or nighttime viewing in SDR, brightness at 15, contrast 83, gamma -2, auto local dimming on high, set the motion how you like, but again this is for 150 nits with the motion clearness setting at 1. And because it's mostly going to be high quality movies, I would suggest putting Cinemotion to high on it. And now for the standard mode, I set this up for people who wanted sports settings. I don't really watch sports, but pretty much you want bright with a higher motion settings, and everything else pretty much can be the same as our other modes. So we're just going to keep the peak luminance, adjust to your room and how bright it is. I just left it at medium. It's a very bright image with the backlight at full. Make sure you pull the color down to 50, you put it on Expert 1 so that the color is accurate. Pull your sharpness down to 50 so there's no edge artifacts. And then reality creation, same thing, pull it down If you're watching a sub-quality or subpar quality image, then turn it up a little bit. It's up to you, play with it. Noise reduction, that's really only if you're watching older stuff with a lot of noise, but whenever you use those settings, you're going to lose detail, so I pretty much always turn them off. I never use them. If you find that you are very sensitive to film grain and so on, you can try turning them on. Cinemotion, you may have to turn that off for sports, but try low and see if that works. And then you can try high as well. But again, our 10-point carried over. So now we have sports done. And now we're going to set up the graphics mode for PC use. And again, it's a lot of the same stuff. I actually turned the brightness down a little bit because I don't know, for me, I find if I'm staring at a screen for a monitor, I don't want it blaringly bright, so play with that so that it doesn't bother your eyes. Local dimming, if you're going to be staring at your desktop, you probably don't need it on, but as soon as you put on a video or a game or whatever, you're going to want it on high. Reality creation, keep that off. You don't want to have really anything messing with the picture when you're using a desktop. If you keep all that stuff at auto, it should automatically detect what you need. And again, 10-point carries over, so we're good here. And just showing the auto local dimming, again, either high if you're in content, off if you're at the desktop maybe. Alright, now we are in HDR, not Dolby Vision. This is HDR10, and you only need to do one mode for movie and video watching because you want your brightness turned up. So just go ahead and leave the contrast alone, gamma alone. Keep it on gradation preferred. That's the most accurate and visually detailed setting you're going to have. Your local dimming, again, put to high. Keep your peak luminance on high. The color temperature you can keep on Expert 1 so that it maintains that 10-point control that we changed. Smooth gradation, again, up to you. And here with the clearness, if you turn on the black frame insertion, you drop luminance or the brightness a little bit. But if you want it on for the motion resolution, that's up to you if you want to make that trade-off. And HDR Game mode would be the same thing. Sorry, now we are in Dolby Vision, and you get Dolby Vision Bright, Dark, or Vivid, so we're going to do the Dolby Vision Bright mode. And you really don't want to mess with too much stuff in Dolby Vision, so keep the HDR tone mapping off. This is all up to Dolby Vision to make its own choices here. I am going to turn local dimming again to high because I find medium to have too much blooming. Reality creation, you can leave that on or off, that's up to you. Smooth gradation, probably leave it on low. Motion settings, again, up to you. For HDR and Dolby Vision, I like to turn off the black frame insertion for the extra brightness. Now, what we don't want is this, the 10-point control change that we made. So this is where we're going to put its Expert 2, so that goes away. And the reason we do that is Dolby Vision with Sony will use a different white point for its algorithm that it uses to adjust everything. So we don't want to mess with anything and harm anything. So Dolby Vision is just really easy to set up and use. You can do the dark mode if you like, if you're in a really dark room. Personally, I don't care if I'm in a dark room. I want Dolby Vision to be bright as possible. So that should cover all your needs for the Sony X90J settings and startup, and I will have one more video on this television as a final review and going through some content, but that pretty much covers it. I hope this helps some of you out there. Overall, I'd say the TV is pretty good. It's got a few drawbacks, but nothing too major. And that's it. Thanks. Have a good one.